Get
I
this
am
woman out
not
of here.
backing
She's filthy,
down.
disgusting, a
Dang
washed-up
on.
nobody.
Ah!
The words exploded across the room like glass shattering on marble. Stevie J's voice carried no hesitation, only
I have
arrogance,
carefully considered
sharpened
your
with years of
proposal,
entitlement.
and my decision remains
He leaned
firm.
forward, lips
This is
curled, jabbing a
absurd.
finger toward
You can't
Eve
be
as if she were
serious.
vermin trespassing in his house. The insult wasn't whispered, it was announced like policy, loud enough for everyone present to hear. A
The
hush
system
fell.
has been
Cameras
verified.
flashed. T.I, standing just 2 steps behind, smirked and added gasoline to the fire. You really think people still believe you? Please, sit down before you embarrass yourself. The crowd shifted uneasily. Reporters blinked, unsure whether to lower their mics or raise them higher. And there she was, Eve, 46 years old, seated in the center, her face framed by the glow of overhead lights. She didn't flinch. Not when they spat on her reputation, not when Stevie slammed his hand against the table so hard the water glasses trembled. She only blinked once, slow, deliberate, like a queen who had seen this storm many times before. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was the storm gathering strength. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Eve. The insult still lingered in the air, heavy as smoke. Stevie J pushed further. He reached for Eve's notes. Her personal folder laid neatly on the table, and with one motion ripped the top page in half. The sound of tearing paper was louder than it should have been. A gasp broke out from the far side of the room. A junior journalist, barely 26, clutched her recorder tighter. T.I. chuckled low, shaking his head. See? Even your evidence is fake. You're pathetic. Eve inhaled slowly. Her chest rose once, then settled. She didn't snatch the papers back. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, her eyes locked on Stevie's hand still gripping the torn sheet. The silence she gave him was heavier than any slap could have been. One by one, people in the room began to realize they were witnessing more than an argument. They were standing inside a trial of dignity, broadcast in real time. Stevie thought he had ended the conversation. But in truth, he had just written the opening line of a story that would undo him. And Eve, calm, unshaken, was about to turn that silence into the sharpest weapon he had ever faced. She didn't look like a mogul. That was the point. Eve sat in a simple black blouse, gold hoops catching the light, and her hair swept back from a face carved by resilience more than makeup. No entourage, no designer bag stamped with labels, no guards stationed at the door. To anyone who didn't know better, she could have been just another woman speaking her truth in a hostile room. That miscalculation was intentional. Because Eve wasn't only the rapper who had once dominated stages across the globe. She was the quiet owner behind a web of ventures, fashion, wellness, real estate, and yes, music labels. She had built them quietly, deliberately, never needing her name stamped across every press release. Power, she knew, was sharper when it was hidden until the exact moment it needed to be revealed. But in this room, on this night, that silence was misread. T.I. leaned against the podium, adjusting his cufflinks. Every movement a message. I'm in control here. Stevie J slouched back, satisfied, sipping water like he owned the table, and the murmurs rippled around them. Reporters, bloggers, onlookers whispering, "Why, is she here? What's she proving? She doesn't even look the part anymore." Those whispers carried the same rhythm Eve had heard since she was 21. Back then, she'd walked into her first label meeting wearing thrift store heels, only to be told, "You don't look marketable." At 30, she tried to buy her first property, cash in hand, and the broker laughed at her credit report, ignoring the zeros on her account. At 35, she pitched a tech startup, and the investors looked past her as though she were invisible. Invisible until her success demanded they see her. Now 46, the same eyes scanned her again, searching for flaws, proof she didn't belong. It was the same cycle, same theatre, same refusal to recognize who sat in front of them. Except this time, Eve wasn't here to wait for validation. She was here to stage a reckoning. Behind her chair, a young journalist no older than 28 lifted her phone, ready to capture history. To her right, a legal advisor in his late 30s folded his arms, already suspicious of the tone in the room. They didn't know it yet, but they were about to become witnesses, not just to slander, but to justice unfolding in real time. Eve tapped her pen once on the table. Just once. The sound echoed more than it should have, commanding attention. Her eyes swept the room, pausing briefly on T.I., then Stevie J., then the cluster of recorders stacked like vultures, waiting to feast on her words. "I came here today," she said softly, steady as stone, "to speak truth, but it looks like some of you came here to bury it." The murmurs stopped. Her voice was low, but it carried like a gavel striking wood. She hadn't revealed who she really was, not yet. For now, she let them underestimate her, because the longer they played this game, the more devastating her reveal would be. And in the silence that followed, even the most cynical reporter in the back row began to realize this wasn't going to be just another press conference. This was a storm waiting to break. The silence didn't last long. T.I. broke it with a scoff, leaning forward just enough to let his gold watch catch the lights. "Truth?" he repeated, dragging the word out like it was an inside joke. "Come on, Eve. You've been chasing truth for decades. Nobody bought it then. Nobody's buying it now." Laughter rippled from the back of the room, thin and nervous. Stevie J leaned in, his grin wide, his voice sharp. "Let's be real. You're bitter because your time is up. We've seen it before. Old stars, washed out, reaching for headlines by calling men like us monsters." He paused, savouring the sting. Then he added, "Problem is, nobody cares anymore. You're not relevant enough to cancel." The words landed like punches, not because they were true, but because of how effortlessly they rolled off his tongue, as if rehearsed for years. The crowd shifted. Reporters scribbled faster. Cameras zoomed closer. Every insult was a headline waiting to be written. Eve didn't move. Her fingers rested flat on the table, her gaze locked on them like steel. She didn't need to answer yet, because every second of their arrogance was only tightening the noose they had hung around their own necks. Still, the escalation was undeniable. T.I. pushed away from the podium and stepped closer, voice low but dripping venom. "You know what's funny? For someone who claims abuse, you sure stayed close. You sure cashed the checks. What's that make you? A victim, or just another opportunist?" Gasps scattered the room. A young woman in the second row shook her head violently, whispering to her colleague, "That's foul." The legal advisor in the corner adjusted his glasses, his jaw tightening. The journalist, still filming, mouthed the word "unbelievable." Stevie J wasn't done. He slapped the table again, the echo bouncing off the walls. "You came here with nothing but stories, no proof, no witnesses, just your word. And guess what? Your word ain't worth a damn." The arrogance was suffocating. But Eve sat still, the calm eye of a growing hurricane. Inside her, memories clawed their way up. The same disbelief when she was 21 told her bruises were just accidents. The same laughter when she was 30 and tried to file a complaint, only to be asked, "Are you sure you want to ruin your career over this?" She remembered every denial, every dismissal, every wound turned into rumour instead of justice. And now here they were repeating the same script, louder, crueler, shameless. A reporter finally raised her voice, trembling but clear. "Why are you dismissing her before she's even spoken? Why not let her finish?" Stevie shot her a glare. "Stay in your lane. This ain't your fight." But it was. Everyone in that room could feel it. The fight wasn't just Eve's anymore. It was about every silence, every dismissal, every moment when arrogance was allowed to masquerade as truth. Eve blinked once, slowly. Her lips parted, but instead of anger, her tone came calm, precise. "You're right about one thing. My word alone isn't enough." Stevie smirked, ready to gloat. Then Eve leaned forward, voice sharpening like glass, which is why I brought more than words. The room shifted. The storm was about to break. The room waited for her to explode. Stevie J leaned back in his chair, arms folded, a smirk plastered on his face like armour. T.I. crossed the stage, pacing like a predator who believed his prey was already cornered. Every camera tilted toward Eve, hungry for a meltdown. Instead, Eve sat perfectly still. One hand rested lightly on the table, the other tracing the edge of her notes. What was left of them after Stevie's tearing stunt? Her breathing was even, her posture grounded. She didn't twitch. She didn't raise her voice. She let their noise ricochet off the walls and collapse under its own weight. The silence became unbearable. A reporter in the second row shifted nervously, the scratching of his pen suddenly too loud. The hum of a camera lens adjusting felt intrusive. Even the air itself seemed heavy, charged, waiting for her to break. But she didn't. Her eyes moved slowly, deliberately, from Stevie to T.I., then to the cluster of microphones in front of her. Her gaze lingered there, not on the men hurling insults, but on the very tools recording every word they spoke. That was the message. I don't need to fight you. The world is already listening. T.I. tried again, louder this time, desperate to reclaim the momentum. What's wrong, Eve? Cat got your tongue? Thought you came here to tell your big story. Don't go quiet now. Stevie laughed, sharp and mean. Yeah, thought she had receipts. Guess the only thing she brought was silence. But silence wasn't weakness. Eve leaned forward, elbows resting gently on the table. Her voice, when it came, was low, so low the room had to strain to catch it. Funny thing about silence, she said, her words measured like drops of ice water. It makes people reveal themselves. A ripple passed through the crowd. The young journalist filming nodded slowly, as if understanding had just struck. The legal advisor in the corner straightened, his attention sharpening. Stevie frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Eve didn't answer. She simply let the question hang, heavy and unanswered, until it was clear he had no real reply. The longer she stayed calm, the more frantic they became. T.I.'s pacing grew sharper, his voice rising, pushing harder, as though volume could fill the cracks opening in his composure. Stevie slammed his palm on the table again, this time not with arrogance but with frustration. Yet Eve remained unmoved. Inside her, memories pressed forward again. Her at 32, standing in a courtroom where her testimony was laughed at. Her at 40, reading headlines that painted her as unstable while men with power walked free. Each time she had burned with the urge to scream, but tonight at 46 she realized the truth. Silence, when chosen, could be louder than any scream. And so she sat, still deliberate, letting them choke on their own noise. Then, just as the tension threatened to snap, she exhaled softly, and her next words slid across the room like a blade. You mistake my calm for surrender. That will be your last mistake. The room froze. In that instant, everyone watching, reporters, staff, even the skeptics, understood the storm hadn't passed. It was only circling, waiting to strike. The silence Eve commanded rippled outward like a wave, and people began to move. A woman in the second row, 28, sharp blazer, phone trembling in her hands, raised her camera higher. The red light blinked to life. She whispered, barely audible, "The world needs to see this." Her colleague, a young Latino reporter, leaned over. "Careful. If they catch you recording, they'll throw you out." But she didn't lower her phone. Not this time. Across the aisle, a man in his mid-30s, Marcus Reed, a civil rights attorney, folded his arms tighter. His jaw flexed, eyes narrowing on Stevie's casual smirk and T.I.'s restless pacing. "This isn't just arrogance," he muttered to himself. "This is a setup." He reached for his notepad, scribbling timestamps, capturing every word. Near the back, a middle-aged woman, guest of another panelist, shook her head slowly. "I brought my daughter here to see role models," she whispered. "And this is what they show us. Men tearing a woman apart in front of cameras." Her daughter, barely out of college, whispered back, "She's not breaking. Look at her. She's stronger than both of them." The shift was subtle but undeniable. Even the crew couldn't ignore it. A sound technician, black, mid-20s, headset tilted, hesitated with his hand on the volume controls. He looked at his supervisor, then back at Eve. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. Respect. He mouthed under his breath, "She's not alone." Stevie J noticed the phones tilting, the eyes narrowing, the energy shifting against him. "Put those cameras down," he barked, pointing directly at the journalist with the raised phone. "This is private business. Nobody needs your little clips." The room bristled. The journalist didn't flinch. She spoke louder this time, voice shaking but resolute. "No, this is public now." Gasps swept through the rows. The moment was small, but it cracked the veneer of control. Stevie turned red, his anger no longer amusement but panic. T.I. stepped in fast, raising his hands like a conductor trying to drown out discord. "Don't get distracted," he said sharply, glaring at the witnesses. "She's playing you. This is all theatre. You think she's some hero? Please. She's nothing without the men she's trying to destroy." But the words didn't land the same anymore. They bounced back, brittle, against the witnesses who were no longer passive. They were paying attention. Recording. Judging. Eve sat still, letting them argue with shadows. Then her gaze slid toward the lawyer in the corner. Their eyes met, just for a second. He gave the smallest nod, an unspoken promise. I see you. I hear you. You're not alone in this room anymore. And with that, the tide had turned. What began as two men trying to bury a woman in noise had become something else entirely, a room awakening, witnesses rising, history being written not just in Eve's silence, but in the voices of those who refused to let silence erase her. The storm wasn't hers alone anymore. It belonged to everyone watching. The room had shifted, but T.I. refused to see it. He slammed his palm down on the podium, the sound cracking through the air like a gunshot. "Enough of this performance," he barked. His voice was louder now, forced, as though volume could plaster over the cracks showing in his control. "You don't get to rewrite history, Eve. Not here. Not today." Stevie J leaned in immediately, eager to pile on. "Exactly. You're not testifying. You're not on trial. You're not even relevant. This whole act? It's pathetic. You don't belong in this room, let alone in this industry." The words were daggers thrown fast and hard. Gasps rippled again, sharper this time. The journalist's camera light flared brighter, catching every syllable, every sneer. Eve's expression didn't change, but the attorney in the corner shifted forward in his seat, pen poised mid-air, disbelief painted across his face. Did he really just say she doesn't belong in the industry she helped build? He muttered under his breath. T.I. wasn't finished. He jabbed a finger at Eve, his voice cutting like a whip. "You want respect? Earn it. You want to talk about abuse? Bring proof. Until then, you're just another bitter woman trying to drag down men who made you." The words hung heavy, ugly, final. Stevie J smirked, tossing back the last of his water. "Tell you what," he added, leaning closer, voice oily, "why don't you save yourself the embarrassment? Get up, walk out that door, and maybe, we won't bury whatever's left of your name." It was a dare, a trap disguised as mercy. The crowd stirred, unease spreading like smoke. One woman in the back row shook her head fiercely. "This is bullying," she whispered, almost too angry to breathe. A man beside her murmured, "Worse, this is erasure." But T.I. doubled down, his tone colder now, sharpened into dismissal. "Security's waiting outside. One word from us and you'll be escorted out like the fraud you are." Fraud. That single word echoed. Reporters glanced at one another, pens stalling mid-page. The insult wasn't just personal. It was an accusation meant to stain, to stick, to follow her beyond this room. Eve didn't move, didn't blink. Instead, she inhaled slowly, letting the venom saturate the air. Her silence stretched long enough to make them uncomfortable, long enough for the witnesses to feel the wrongness thickening around them. The journalist whispered into her mic. He just called her a fraud, on record. The attorney scribbled faster, jaw tight. And yet Eve sat still, eyes locked on Stevie, then T.I., as though she were memorizing every word, engraving them into stone. Because she knew what they didn't. The higher they raised their voices, the further they fell into the trap of their own arrogance. And when she finally spoke, her words would not only dismantle their attack, it would end the illusion of their power altogether. It started with a laugh, Stevie J's, sharp and cruel. He reached across the table, snatching the folder Eve had laid neatly before her. Without hesitation, he hurled it to the floor, pages scattered like broken feathers, sliding across the polished wood, trampled by his expensive shoes. "There's your proof," he sneered. "Trash, just like you." Gasps tore through the room. A woman in the second row clutched her chest. The journalist's camera shook, but she didn't stop recording. Every second was captured. The theft, the arrogance, the humiliation staged in plain sight. T.I. stepped forward, his voice booming. "Security!" The word cracked like a whip. Doors swung open at the back of the hall, and two uniformed guards appeared. Broad shoulders, blank stares, radios clipped to their belts. The threat was no longer rhetorical. It had entered the room, heavy boots on polished tile. Eve didn't flinch. Stevie jabbed a finger at her, his smirk widening. "Escort her out. She's trespassing. She doesn't belong here." The guards hesitated. Just for a second, their eyes flicked from Stevie's rage to Eve's calm, then to the cluster of witnesses now whispering, recording, resisting the script being forced on them. "Move," T.I. barked, impatient. He slapped the podium for emphasis, his voice rising. "She's wasting everyone's time. Fraud, liar, attention seeker. Take your pick. Just get her out." The weight of his words hung in the air. Fraud, liar, trespasser. Words meant to erase, words meant to stick to her skin like chains. And yet Eve remained perfectly still. Her chair creaked softly as she leaned back, eyes following the guards as they inched closer, her face unreadable, her silence louder than any scream could have been. She let them come, let them circle, let them think they held the power. The witnesses stirred. The young journalist spoke up first, her voice trembling but clear. "This is wrong. You can't remove her for speaking." The lawyer stood, his voice firmer. "Touch her and you're complicit in obstruction. I'll see to it personally." The tension spiked. Stevie's face reddened. T.I. snarled, "Sit down! This isn't your fight!" But the words rang hollow now, brittle in a room no longer convinced. Eve's hand moved slowly to her lap. She picked up a single page Stevie hadn't managed to scatter, smoothed it flat against the table, and set her pen across it with deliberate care. Then she lifted her eyes, steady and sharp. "You tore my words," she said softly, "but you can't tear my truth." The silence after that was deafening. Even the guards hesitated, frozen mid-step, caught between orders and something far heavier, the weight of injustice playing out under the gaze of every witness, every camera, every recording phone in the room. And in that silence, one thing became clear. The line had been crossed. The storm wasn't approaching anymore. It was already here. The guards hovered, uncertain. Stevie J barked again, his voice cracking with desperation. "Do your job, get her out!" But Eve's hand was already moving, not toward them, not toward the scattered papers, but toward the sleek black phone resting beside her water glass. She lifted it with calm precision, the way one might lift a gavel before striking judgment. One tap. That was all. The line connected instantly. A crisp voice answered, steady, professional, ready. "Yes, Miss Johnson, standing by." The room stiffened. Stevie frowned. T.I. tilted his head, confused for the first time all evening. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. Eve's voice remained low, measured. "Activate protocol." There was no hesitation on the other end. "Confirmed. Logging time 9:42 p.m. All systems live." The journalist's camera captured it the moment the atmosphere shifted. No longer was Eve framed as the accused. With one phrase, she had flipped the script. She was issuing orders, not defending herself. T.I. forced a laugh, brittle and sharp. "What the hell is this? Some little drama for your fans? You think a phone call saves you?" Eve's eyes lifted to meet his. Calm, steady, dangerous. "No," she said softly. "I don't need saving." Stevie J snorted. "Then what?" Before he could finish, the voice on the phone echoed through the small speaker, louder now, deliberate. "System verification complete. Security footage archived. Audio logs synchronized. Legal counsel patched in." The lawyer in the corner straightened, eyes wide. He understood what the others didn't yet. She wasn't bluffing. Stevie's smirk faltered. Eve set the phone gently on the table, speaker still active. Her words sliced through the charged silence. Every insult, every lie, every attempt to erase me, recorded, verified, preserved. "You didn't just attack me tonight. You built the evidence yourself." The crowd murmured, restless now, the balance shifting. The guards froze where they stood, unwilling to take another step. T.I. tried again, but the confidence had drained from his tone. You can't be serious. This is nothing." Eve leaned forward, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of iron. "This is everything. Because tonight, the world won't just hear my word, they'll see yours." The journalist whispered to her mic, "She's turning it around. She's documenting everything, live." Stevie J slammed his fist on the table, but the sound no longer commanded. It rattled like the last desperate move of a man already losing ground. And Eve, calm, relentless, sat anchored in her silence, her protocol humming in the background, witnesses watching, cameras rolling. For the first time, it wasn't her on trial, it was them. The phone on the table hummed softly, its speaker alive with background clicks and confirmations. The protocol was no bluff, it was a machine turning, gears locking into place. Eve straightened in her chair, her shoulders squared. The room seemed to tilt toward her, pulled by an invisible gravity. "You wanted me gone," she began, her tone calm, every word deliberate. "You called me a fraud. A liar. Nothing. You thought tearing my papers, summoning guards, shouting louder than me would bury the truth." She paused. The silence was electric, heavy, unblinking. "But you forgot something." Her eyes swept across the room, landing on Stevie, then T.I. "This isn't your house. This isn't your stage. It's mine." The guards froze, the witnesses leaned forward. Even the hum of the lights seemed to quiet, as if the building itself was listening. Eve's hand brushed the phone once more. Confirm identity. The voice on the line was crisp, resonant, verified. Evelyn Johnson, Chief Executive Officer, Phoenix Entertainment Group, primary stakeholder, executive authority level, full. The words detonated across the room. Gasps, shouts, phones lifted higher. The journalist filming nearly dropped her device before clutching it tighter. Stevie's face drained of colour. CEO? He muttered, the word foreign on his tongue. T.I. stepped back as though struck, his smirk dissolving into disbelief. Wait, Phoenix Entertainment? That's... You don't. Eve cut him off, her voice sharpened to a blade. I don't what? Belong? Sit here? Speak? You've been cashing checks signed with my authority for years, and tonight you spat in the face of the woman who owns the pen. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, the frenzied clicking of cameras capturing history in real time. Eve didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her revelation pressed down heavier than any shout could. You thought you were humiliating a woman out of her place, she said, eyes burning steady. But the truth is, you've been standing in my place this whole time, borrowing my stage, eating from my table, mistaking my silence for absence. Her gaze locked on Stevie J, who had taken a half-step back, his swagger dissolved. Then on T.I., whose eyes darted to the crowd, searching for escape. Eve leaned in, her words final, unshakable. You didn't just insult me tonight. You insulted your boss. The room fell silent. For the first time, T.I. and Stevie J looked small, cornered not by shouts but by truth. And the witnesses, the journalist, the lawyer, the audience at home, they all knew. The game had just ended. Eve wasn't the accused anymore. She was the verdict. For a moment, the revelation sat in the room like a bomb that hadn't finished exploding. Then the panic began. Stevie J was the first to unravel. No, this is a stunt, he stammered, his voice cracking as he jabbed a trembling finger toward the phone. That voice, that system, it's fake. She's bluffing. She's always bluffing. But the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. His swagger had bled away, leaving only fear. T.I. tried harder to hold on. He forced a smile, shallow and brittle, pacing again as though movement might distract from his unraveling. CEO? Please. If you had that kind of power, you wouldn't be sitting here wasting time. This is smoke and mirrors, people. Don't let her fool you. But the witnesses weren't buying it. The young journalist raised her phone higher, her voice clear now, trembling no longer. It's real. We just heard the system verify her identity. She is the CEO. The attorney stood, his presence commanding. Gentlemen, you've just committed workplace harassment, defamation and attempted removal of your own employer. On record, with witnesses. Congratulations, you've destroyed yourselves. Gasps turned into open voices. A woman in the back row shouted, She owns you! Another voice followed, You're finished. Phones waved like protest signs, every angle catching Stevie's paling face, T.I.'s darting eyes, Eve's unshaken calm. The guards stepped back, hands dropping from their radios. They no longer moved toward Eve. They edged away from Stevie and T.I., unwilling to be pawns in a collapsing game. Stevie slammed his fist once more, but it landed hollow, desperate. This is a setup! You all think she's some saint? She's nothing! His voice cracked on the last word, shrill, stripped of its former authority. T.I. stopped pacing. His smile was gone, replaced by silence that said more than words ever could. He saw it now, the shift, the judgment in every eye, the recognition that they weren't predators anymore. They were prey. And Eve, steady as stone, sat at the centre of it all. Her calm hadn't changed, but the room around her had. No longer hostile, no longer doubtful. The air itself seemed to lean toward her, drawn by the gravity of dignity finally revealed. The journalist whispered into her mic, almost reverent. History just flipped. They tried to bury her. Instead, they just unearthed her crown. The crowd wasn't whispering anymore. They were clapping, some timid at first, then louder, swelling until the sound filled the room. Applause not just for Eve, but for every silence broken, every injustice reversed in that moment. And under the weight of it, Stevie and T.I. stood exposed, men who had mistaken arrogance for power, now crushed beneath the truth they couldn't escape. The collapse was complete. The applause still echoed when Eve lifted her hand, and the room fell silent at once. She didn't need to shout. Authority lived in her stillness. Her eyes locked on Stevie first, then T.I. For years you thought my silence was protection, she said, that I needed you, that I would never fight back. Tonight that illusion dies. She tapped her phone once more. The voice on the other end responded instantly. "Standing by, Miss Johnson." Eve's tone never wavered. "Effective immediately. Terminate all contracts with Clifford Harris, stage name T.I, and Stephen Jordan, known as Stevie J. Revoke access to Phoenix Entertainment facilities, systems, and accounts. Freeze royalties until legal audit is complete." The words landed like hammer strikes. "Processing now," the voice confirmed. Stevie lunged forward, panic breaking through arrogance. "You can't do this. You need me." The phone chimed, cutting him off. Contract Stevie J terminated. Access credentials revoked. A red light blinked on the table's projection screen. His name, once tethered to power, flickered out. The crowd erupted, gasps, shouts, phones capturing every second. T.I tried to salvage ground. "Eve, listen, we can work this out." Eve's gaze cut to him, sharp enough to still him mid-sentence. "Work it out? You stood here, called me a liar, tried to drag me out of my own house. You built your empire on disrespect. That empire ends tonight. Contract, T.I. Terminated. Access credentials. Revoked," the phone declared. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried finality heavier than any scream. T.I.'s face drained as his phone buzzed. Notification after notification. Accounts locked, emails bouncing, authority dissolving in real time. He looked around desperately, searching for allies, but found only raised phones and cold eyes recording his fall. Stevie clutched his badge, swiping it against the door reader near the stage. It blinked red. Denied. Again. Red. Denied. Each failure louder than the last, until he dropped the card like it burned his hand. The guards didn't move to protect them. They stepped back, letting the justice unfold. The young journalist whispered, almost reverent, "She just erased them. Right here. Live." Eve leaned back in her chair, folding her hands calmly before her. "This isn't revenge," she said, her voice carrying across the stunned room. "It's correction, and correction is overdue." The applause returned. Stronger now, rolling like thunder. Witnesses rose to their feet, phones aloft, voices echoing the single truth. The power had shifted. And in that shift, Stevie J and T.I stood stripped. No contracts, no authority, no control. Eve had dismantled them not with rage, but with order. Quiet, final, irreversible. The room was no longer theirs. It belonged to her. Stevie J slumped in his chair, face pale, hands trembling as though the badge still burned his skin. T.I stood frozen, his phone buzzing with denial after denial, access revoked, contract void, royalty hold. Each vibration was a nail sealing the coffin of his power. The witnesses didn't whisper anymore. They stood tall, some clapping, some filming, all united in one unshakable truth. The narrative had shifted, and there was no turning back. Eve rose slowly from her chair. The sound of wood against tile echoed like a gavel striking final judgment. She didn't need a podium. She didn't need a stage. The room itself bent toward her. Her eyes swept the crowd, steady, unflinching. Then she spoke, low, sharp, every syllable etched with authority. "You mistook my silence for weakness. You mistook my calm for surrender. And you mistook my dignity for something you could erase." The words sliced through the air, leaving nothing untouched. She paused, letting the silence breathe, then delivered the line that would live far beyond that night. "That was your last mistake." Gasps gave way to cheers. Applause thundered, rolling through the hall like a storm breaking free. The journalist lowered her phone for a moment, tears catching in her eyes, whispering, "She did it." The attorney closed his notepad, satisfied, murmuring, "Justice, right here, right now." Eve's gaze shifted once more to T.I and Stevie J. They couldn't meet her eyes. They were small now, shrinking men standing in the ruins of their arrogance. She didn't raise her voice when she spoke the final words. She didn't need to. The gravity of them sank into every ear, every recording, every live stream reaching thousands beyond those walls. "I don't need to prove myself. I am the proof. I am the result, and from this moment forward you will never mistake me again." She set the phone down gently, its light fading, the protocol complete. Then, with a final glance, she turned. Not hurried, not shaken, but steady, regal, untouchable. The crowd parted for her instinctively as though a queen were walking through her court. Applause followed her steps, swelling until it became the only sound in the hall. Behind her, 2 men sat hollow, stripped of power, while the world documented every second of their fall. And Eve, black CEO, survivor, victor, walked out not with rage but with dignity sharpened into triumph. Justice hadn't just been spoken, it had been executed.